Mayor Scott Smith joins us from Mesa, Arizona, where he implemented a successful planning initiative integrating education, transit-oriented development, federal investments, and community participation. He's credited with stabilizing the city's finances and putting Mesa on a positive fiscal path that withstood the recession. Recently, he led the effort to bring 4 legacy colleges to downtown Mesa and establishing the Mesa Center for Higher Education. The Arizona Republic named Mayor Smith the city's MVP, stating that Smith is restoring Mesa to its rightful place as a regional leader. He has strengthened ties with several cities and has gained the confidence of many skeptical residents. The change is so marked that we shudder to think what shape the city would be in without him at the helm. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Scott Smith.
All right, I know you're wondering what in the world is the mayor of Mesa, Arizona doing here, speaking to those of you here in Las Vegas, Southern Nevada, about what to do. Well, believe it or not, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about Mesa, Arizona. For those of you who don't know about Mesa, Arizona, Rob Lang mentioned the boom burbs. Mesa, Arizona actually was the largest boom burb in his book at the time. Mesa is the biggest city, and with all, not to mention Reno and their crazy little logo, we are actually the biggest city most people have never heard of. Mesa is the 38th largest city in the country. We're the 3rd largest city in Arizona. We're just under 450,000, and we, like Las Vegas, have experienced a lot of growth in the last 50 years. And as a matter of fact, we have much more in common with Las Vegas than you would imagine. First of all, Mesa and Las Vegas were both founded by Mormons. Mesa sort of kept that with it, and Las Vegas moved on to other things. But in a sense, our history is very similar to those other, what I would call peer communities that Rob talked about also, which is why I'm here with you. I've worked a lot with the Brookings Institution on their Mountain West initiative, because we in the Intermountain West have a history that, while is somewhat diverse, is very much similar. We all grew up as sort of an outpost, a place where people were passing through, or they never came. Or if the brave few souls who did come, they were engaged in something that was ignored by the rest of the country. And then something wonderful happened. In both Las Vegas and Arizona, air conditioning was invented. And World War II ended. And all of a sudden you had all these returning service men and women with college educations looking for something better, and something great happened. We all grew. And so while we have a great history, and in Mesa we were actually founded in 1878, we, like you, are a post-World War II phenomenon. And so what happened is that we grew fast, and we got to the point where we actually measured our success based on how many Midwesterners and Northeasterners thought it was cool to come here instead of shovel snow. And that sort of became the barometer by which we measured, the metric. And what happened was that we grew, and albeit in very different ways, the result was exactly the same. Growth hides a lot of miscues. Growth, while it's hiding those miscues, creates and sets us up for something that when the banker comes to pay, or whatever you want to say it, we realize, oh my gosh, what have we done? And so we're both in very similar situations, because the Phoenix area, Mesa included, and Southern Nevada all went through this great boom economy in the 90s and the 2000s, and then we hit the wall. And the two areas with the greatest foreclosures and the greatest decrease in home values, guess where? Las Vegas, Nevada, Phoenix, Arizona. So in many ways, we're going through the same thing. We've experienced the same thing. You a little bit different. We didn't invest a few $1 billion on our strip. You did. But we did invest a few $1 billion in other things. We woke up one day and realized that not having a diverse economy was not going to create a future for us. And we realized that the future that we thought was so great was now somewhat in question. We started doubting ourselves. And like every other metro area, every other big city, we started wondering what we were going to do when we grew up, what we were going to be. And you know, every city goes through this. Really old cities like New York City, Chicago, others have also wondered what they were going to do when they grow up. I remember walking through Times Square in 1985. I remember that because my wife was 7 months pregnant. And I remember here these two hicks from Arizona walking through the middle of Times Square, and two of New York's finest really were shadowing us about a half a block behind. And the reason they were doing that is if you remember Times Square in 1985, it was not the place for a 7-month-old hick from Arizona to be. We didn't know that. These two police officers knew that. And then I flash forward to, in the last 10, 15 years when you could walk from Greenwich Village clear up through Times Square and not worry about anything because New York had to reinvent itself. Every city goes through this, every urban area. We're just new at this because we're so young and we're trying to find ourselves. Now, what we can do is we can learn from what others have done. And we do have peer groups, and Rob mentioned them. You look at, and I look at this and I look at who are our peer. Las Vegas, you're interesting because you have no peers in one area. There's no place else that brings 40 million people a year. Oh, wait a second, there is. You do have a peer community. You do have a community that looked at itself. I've gotten to know Mayor Buddy Dyer of Orlando. Orlando 50 years ago was a bunch of cow farms and orange groves. And then they started they got up to 50 million people a year. And what they found out is that it's great to have people come in, 50 million people come in to visit for a day, a week, or whatever. But then when they leave and when the economy goes down, you realize that no one else takes you seriously. We see that's where Mesa and Las Vegas are the same, for exactly opposite reasons. Because as an outsider looking at Vegas, I believe I've spent a lot of time in Las Vegas. This is my first political venture. Before this, I was a CPA attorney, and then I got into home building development. And in the 90s and early 2000s, I spent gobs of time in Las Vegas, going from Summerlin down to Southern Highlands to Anthem to every planned community that's ever been built, that was built in Las Vegas, every development that was built, I guarantee you, I've spent a day or two in it, getting ideas, figuring out how to do things, looking at architecture. And so as an outsider, I'm looking at Las Vegas and I'm realizing that in many ways you're like us in Mesa. In Mesa, being this Mormon little community, we felt that people didn't understand us because they had us as a stereotype. A stereotype is a boring, family-centered community. And you know what? That's great until you want to get people to invest in your community, to take you seriously. And then they go someplace else. They go to Tempe, Chandler, Scottsdale, Phoenix. But Mesa was an afterthought. But one reason I ran for mayor was because Google was looking for a place to put their next great location. And they came to Arizona. They liked it because Arizona State University has a great place for engineers and software. And they looked at every place, but Mesa was not listed as one of the places to look. And there were two things that bothered me. Number one, everyone said, why would Google ever look at Mesa? That hurt. What bothered me even more is that Mesa said, why would we ever want to Google here? We're a family community. Now tell me, though, that I couldn't tell the same story about Las Vegas in a completely different way. When you have a few $1 billion laid on you and you have all these thousands and tens of thousands of construction jobs and you have great growth, it's hard to say that you could do things differently to make things better. We decided we had to get away from that. We had to realize that we had to create something that people would take us seriously. People wouldn't look at us as this boring family community, that we had a lot of great things to offer. They won't look at Las Vegas as simply a gaming mecca that 40 million people come to look at, and everything that, that happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, which means that you're not taking us seriously. Southern Nevada is not taking us as seriously by outsiders. I mean, if you're honest, you have to admit that. I went through that in my city. And so it hurt me when places like Google laughed. Well, to tell you how far we've gone, Apple was recently, just in the last year, was looking to set up a North American headquarters, and they looked at two places outside of Cupertino. One of the places they looked at was Austin, Texas. The second place they looked, Mesa, Arizona. And I believe that had they not already had an existing operation in Austin, they probably would have come to Mesa, Arizona. How do you change that perception in such a short time? How do you create an environment where people now want to be there? That's what I think you're looking at when you look at what this Southern Nevada Strong is. And as I looked at this, I said, Southern Nevada Strong is a 3-year project working to build a foundation. Build a foundation. Now, don't you already have a foundation? Well, in a lot of ways, yes, but in a lot of ways you don't, because you recognize that you're over-dependent upon one type of economic activity, one industry, one whatever, for long-term economic success and community livelihood by better integrating reliable transportation, safe, affordable housing, job opportunities. And we went through the same thing in Mesa. But what I found out is that in order to truly understand what you wanted to be, you had to understand where you were going. And so when I came to office, we looked at Mesa and we said, you know what? People don't understand what we are, but we're good at some things. We're really good at certain areas. And so rather than trying to be something that someone else that wanted us, or what we thought we were, or the activity du jour, we came up with what we were strong in. And what we were strong in created an acronym. Well, I love acronyms. Acronyms are easy to understand. Acronyms get people focused. And we came up with Mesa HEAT, H-E-A-T. And guess what? What that meant is that we found that we were really good in PowerPoints. No. We were really good in healthcare. We actually have one of the top-rated children's hospitals that was just built in the last 5 years. We have MD Anderson Cancer Center. We have one of the top-rated heart hospitals. We have incredible health facilities right there in Mesa. We have a medical school in Mesa. We have all these great things, and yet we don't realize it. We are also both really good and really bad in education. If you threw up the things that we were looking at as far as high school matriculation, post-secondary, we have the top-performing top 50 school district in the entire country as far as high school graduates go, the Mesa Public Schools. And we're horrible in post-secondary matriculation. There's a huge gap. What happens? We have a great university, and this starts to sound familiar. Arizona State University, largest public university in the entire country, over 70,000 students. Other than that, we have virtually no economic opportunities. We don't have liberal arts colleges. We don't have the type of variety that cities our size, such as Pittsburgh. You know, Mesa's bigger as a city in population than Miami, than Atlanta, than St. Louis, than Pittsburgh, places like that, and yet when you look at the educational opportunities, we were lagging behind. So this was both a strength and a weakness. We're great in aerospace. We have 2 airports inside the city limits of Mesa. We have Boeing, who has a huge plant there that assembles the Apache attack helicopter. We have another company. We're great. We need to build on that. Oh, gee, tourism. Yes, our tourists are a little bit different than yours. Our tourists seem to come disproportionately from North Dakota and Alberta. They tend to stay in trailer parks instead of the Wynn Resort. But it's, on a relative basis, they're just as important to us as they are to you. And we found out that as you sell an experience, we were selling sunshine. And we were happy with that. We thought that would last forever, and guess what? It didn't. We found out also that T also meant we had to get into technology. These were things that we were good at, and yet we weren't fully taking advantage of them. And so we defined who we were, and we used this as the basis point. And I'll tell you, I knew I had made it when I met Mesa Community College staff meeting. Mesa Community College is 30,000 students strong. It's a large community college there in Mesa. And I'm speaking to the staff, 100 faculty. And the president gets up there and he says, now, in introducing Mayor Smith, I'd like to go over, we all understand what's gone on, and we all are familiar with the HEAT initiative, are we not? And the faculty, yes. Now, what does it stand for? H, the faculty in unison. Healthcare. E, education. A, aerospace. T, tourism technology. And what does that mean when a community is in one voice and understands who they are and where they're headed? It's been amazing to see how now everything we do is couched in economic development terms, not in the traditional sense, because we've realized that the strength of our community cannot be separated from the economic strength of all parts of our community. And the only way that we're going to grow that is to make every decision we can couched in an economic context. Transportation, and this is where I'd like to maybe deviate a little bit from the panel that was up here, is no longer about getting people from point A to point B. It can't be. That's the old model of looking at transportation. Transit can no longer be about getting people who don't have cars. Now, those are noble goals. Those are byproducts of what will happen if you have a good transit system. But the fact of the matter, we realized that we couldn't build a bus system that reached out and hit every apartment complex in the city. What we had to do was we had to treat our transit like we do our transportation. I'm amazed at the rebuild of I-15 as you go through here. The greatest thing about I-15 to many of you may be that your commute isn't as great in the morning. To me, as a visitor, you know what the greatest thing is, and this is why you should be important, oh my gosh, it's so much easier to get down to to get to the northern part from McCarran, if I drive around, come up 15 and get off on Spring Mountain and all those kind of things. In other words, it feeds an economic engine much more efficiently than it would otherwise. It enables you to get goods and services in. And you know what? The other things help the workers, help everything. But the main focus is that you drive an economic engine. And we started thinking of that. And we said, what are the things we can do within this heat area? One of the areas we looked at was light rail. Now, Rob talked about the light rail system in Phoenix, and it really has been a great success. And light rail and fixed, I'll call them fixed routes of transportation, because fixed routes of transit are very different than buses. Buses as a being do not drive economic development like rail does. Just doesn't. Rail is very similar to a freeway. You know, when you build a freeway, something interesting happens. By the exits and the ramps, things start popping up, don't they? You know, people like to build where they can get to. Well, the same thing we thought would happen with light rail, and in Phoenix, that's one of the reasons why we built it. So we now have light rail in Phoenix. It's been there for 4 years. Our system is interesting. If you know the Phoenix area at all, oh, good. It was the largest single rollout of light rail in the history of the United States. 21 miles at one time. Goes from, here's downtown Phoenix right here, Sky Harbor Airport, Arizona State, and right in there, as you get out to Mesa, 1 mile went into Mesa. My predecessor, who hated light rail, he was a libertarian, hates anything transit, but he was smart in this way. He says, you know what? If you're telling me that I can buy 1 mile and get a 21-mile system, and we did it. And now that end station right there is the busiest station on our system. Now, we find out something different about light rail in western states, and if you look at Denver and Salt Lake and Phoenix, they're exactly the same. You know, we talk about how, Nevada and Arizona are the two most urbanized states in the entire union. We have densities that really are greater than some of the big cities, but on the other hand, we don't have the kind of high density cores that older cities do. And so people normally say things like light rail won't work because you have to have all these thousands of people who can walk light rail. Well, guess what? In the West, it doesn't work that way. What people do is, for right now, they get in their car, they go to a park and ride, and they get on light rail. And they do that by thousands. 14 million riders in Phoenix last year on our light rail, on all economic areas. I went to a retirement village in Mesa, of which there are just 1 or 2. And I'm sitting there in front of about 100, every time I say this, I offend somebody. Senior citizens, there we go. I used to say senior, then I realized I'm old enough to live in one of those places. But they're all older than me, and I'm sitting there, and Mesa is also unique in that we are about the reddest big city in America. Democrats they're not in the minority. They barely are a rounding error in Mesa, okay? And so I'm sitting here among all these retirees, fixed income, and the question comes, Mayor Lyon, I want to talk to you about that light rail extension. I'm going, oh my gosh, here we go. Because the next thing I'm going to hear about how transit is a communist conspiracy. Yeah, what about it? Well, when's it going to happen? I says, well, it's going to start hopefully next year if we can get the funding done. Well, I'm not going to be here very much longer. Can you speed it up? I go, excuse me? He said, yeah, I love going on light rail. We do that all the time. That's how we get around. Now, this is about an 80-year-old man. And I said, well, if I could ask you a question, how many of you ride light rail on a consistent basis? And I would say a couple, 3 times a month. 80, 90% of the people in that audience. And they start talking about it. I say, it's changed our life. It's changed how we do things. We don't commute to work. We don't like getting in the city. We love going down, park and ride, get on, and we go do things. We go spend money. It's an adventure. It's a way we get around. And that's what we found in the West. Phoenix, Salt Lake, Denver, very similar. Because Western living is different. We're not going to replace the car. But what we've done is we've caused people to change the way they live. And another interesting thing has happened. Oops, hitting the wrong thing. We recently started the construction of that extension. 3 miles that goes from the end line right now right through our downtown. Now, if you've never been in Mesa, which I'm assuming most of you never have, it's a very traditional downtown. We're 134 years old. We used to be a regional economic center, very traditional downtown. Light rail is headed right up Main Street. It's not a downtown that you would drive out of your way normally to go to. It's been replaced by the regional malls. Exciting things have happened since we announced light rail. And we've used it to not reinvigorate our downtown, but to create an economic center, to create exciting things. the first thing we did is we figured out how we could go further. Now, we had a combination of local and federal monies that we went back and worked very carefully with the Federal Transit Administration and others to figure out how to fund this. The majority of it was funded with a local sales tax. But we didn't have monies to extend it another 2 miles out of our downtown to what has traditionally been here at Gilbert Road. Gilbert is like a 6-lane parkway that runs north-south. It's very much a traditional separation between East and West Mesa. And we didn't have the money to do that 2 miles, so we had to work, and we got very, very creative. We actually worked legislation through the legislature to use federal road street monies, and we transitioned them into doing light rail. Why? Because the light rail has created economic and social and cultural benefits that we never envisioned. Here's the other thing. In a red city who fought not to get light rail, much like Salt Lake, Mesa is now not only hooked, they're committed to light rail. Even our most conservative understand the place that it has. And things like rail have a place because every great metropolitan area, the thing that makes them great is they offer options. They offer alternatives. They offer ways that people can choose to invest and choose to live. And so we decided that our downtown, who had seen better days, needed that option back again. And that's why light rail is so important to Mesa, and it will be an economic driver. The reason I know that is because so far, it already is. This is our Mesa Arts Center, $100 million facility that is beautiful, theater, 4 theaters, arts. It was recently, as a matter of fact, named by the International Organization of Venue Administrators as the International Venue of the Year. We beat out the Sydney Opera House. It's a great place to be. If you were watching, as many of you may have, last February, the pivotal Republican GOP debate was held in the Mesa Arts Center. Something would have never happened. Because why? Mesa was ignored. We said, why not? We have a $100 million arts facility. Well, you know, we fought, we got it, and it got people to notice what was happening. Things like that start happening when you're focused on things like heat. Now, believe it or not, the GOP debate actually fit in with our economic development activity because we recognized that we couldn't get people to notice us and to invest unless we did something that was different, something that was unexpected, something that literally was deemed to be impossible. And for Mesa to host an event like that in Arizona, within Arizona, was, oh, you know, that didn't happen. Amazed how many people changed their perception. And it's changed it so much that now all of a sudden we have things like this. It was 25 years since the last sizable investment in downtown Mesa on any commercial property came. Within the last year, we will now have well over $60 million in new high-density urban-style residences that have either announced or broken ground. 3 of them have already broken ground. The 4th one just announced. The only reason that happens is because of the change. They've done it in anticipation of light rail. They have leveraged federal monies that are transit-related. You know, and that's one thing. There's not going to be a whole lot of money coming out of Washington in the near future, but there is enough that you got to be creative. We did a plan, an overall general plan for our what we call our Main Street corridor, for the 5 miles from the end station right now down to the Gilbert Road extension. And it was all paid for by the federal government, by the Department of Energy. Now go figure. We found out that there was an air quality type of a deal that allowed us to do planning related to transit. Because what you'll see and what you've heard this morning is that there's a change in Washington. This actually started happening during the Bush administration, where the federal government realized that the old ways of doing things could not continue to exist in the new way because the world had changed. And so just funding transportation projects for the sole purpose of moving people was no longer the way to do it. And so they are looking at not only the environmental issues, but economic issues, job growth, not getting people from A to B, but connecting job center and job center, economic opportunity. And that's how we look at it. And guess what? When you connect economic center with economic center, guess what you also do? People get to move from point A to point B. People change, investment changes. And so we've seen that there's a lot of things in HUD, Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, and we've become very, very good at looking at these little nooks and crannies of grants these special places to tie in our initiative, which is to build a better community. The next thing we did, which was pretty exciting, is I said education was one of the fundamental objectives of our HEAT initiative. Well, Mesa, we have not only Arizona State, which is just across the border in Tempe, but out in East Mesa, we have the Arizona State University Polytechnic campus on the grounds of the old Williams Air Force Base. Great, 9,000 students, incredible way to do, but that wasn't enough for us. And so we said we need to attract new colleges. So we actually sent out a proposal, and we said to 1,000 liberal arts, private liberal arts colleges around the country, we said, we want you to come to Mesa, but specifically we want you to come to downtown Mesa, because we believe that being in an urban environment is essential to maximize the educational experience. And all of you liberal arts colleges, you probably are in a small town where the town grew up around the college, so you're used to that. We were shocked that we got an incredible response. As a matter of fact, 24 colleges were serious enough that they wanted to come and give a sales pitch to us. Well, we narrowed that down to 12 colleges. We ended up taking 4 legacy liberal arts colleges who have now set up shop in downtown Mesa. Now, these are not fly-by-night institutions. These are institutions such as Benedictine University, 130-year-old Catholic university. By the way, the first Catholic university in Arizona. We didn't know that. We have 2 million Catholics in Arizona. That's interesting. Catholic university, 2 blocks from the Mormon temple. Got a phone call from a guy, and a lawyer in Phoenix says, wait, Benedictine? My gosh, you sure blew away a few stereotypes with that one. I said, I hope so. But that's what you do when you get people thinking that you're doing things differently than their stereotype. Westminster College, most of you probably have heard of Westminster, don't even realize it. That's from Fulton, Missouri. It's a 150-year-old institution. It's famous for one thing, primarily. It's where Winston Churchill gave his famous Iron Curtain speech. And so they now have, you can get Winston Churchill coffee cups at Westminster now. But they build that. Now they're coming into downtown Mesa. Wilkes University is the young one on the grab, 80 years old out of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Albright College, 100+ years old out of Reading, Pennsylvania. Coming into downtown Mesa, first time we believe this has ever happened, to create a consortium in our city center, 4 liberal arts colleges. We have a 5th one that actually we didn't invite, and they came anyway, and they're right outside of downtown, Upper Iowa University. And they're coming into our downtown, and they said, here's why we're coming down to your downtown. Number one, we believe what you're saying. We look at it, and what we're doing is we're taking an old city, we're like you. That's our old city court building. It's 35 years old. We outgrew it. But we're transforming that into the Mesa Center for Higher Education. That's, by the way, 1 block off of a light rail stop. Without light rail, this doesn't happen. Without light rail, these universities and colleges probably don't come to Mesa. They go look for some place where they can stick them out on a freeway exit in a suburban shopping center, and that's where they'll go. And so what you'll have is you'll have a place where kids can go to college, adults can go to college, but the question is, will they be true economic drivers? Will they help you to redefine your community? And I would say no. They would be another University of Phoenix or something. Nothing against them. I worked for them for a long time. But those aren't community changers. Those don't change what you are. Those don't fulfill the dreams of changing who you are. Which led to our greatest coup. The Barry Goldwater family announced about 4 months ago that they were going to build a $30 million Barry and Peggy Goldwater Senatorial Library in downtown Mesa. Now here's what's interesting about this. Barry Goldwater never lived in Mesa. Barry Goldwater grew up actually outside the city and finally lived in Phoenix, served on the Phoenix City Council before he went back to the Senate and then retired to Paradise Valley. The first choice was downtown Phoenix, but downtown Phoenix didn't understand how this fit in, so I reached out to the family and said, hey, listen, have you ever thought of downtown Mesa? They said, no, you're Mesa. We never think about you. They didn't say that, but I knew that's what they were thinking of. So we started talking to them about our plan. We explained heat. We talked about light rail. We talked about the colleges. We said, now, wouldn't it be great if you're sitting here, the Barry Goldwater Center Library, right next door to the Westminster College and their international relations? I mean, can you get a better mix than that? 4 colleges in a consortium within walking distance of each other. And before you knew it, Barry Goldwater family told Phoenix, thanks, but no thanks, we're going to downtown Mesa. Boy, talk about shocking the world. These things happen when you have a vision, when you specify, it's not good enough just to have vision. You have to specifically say where we're going to go, and then good things happen. Good things happen when those things take place. We've been fortunate to take a sleepy, not little community, a big community that didn't know where it was headed, that really had done things, and Rob explained these communities that are now 20 and 30 years old. We have more than our fair share of those. And yesterday's throw-up subdivision is now today's blight. We have people who didn't know what they wanted. We have kids, and with all due respect, I will tell you our biggest problem, and I'm sorry I can't remember your name, talking about getting your kids to go away and come back. The problem is that they don't come back unless there's opportunity. And we find that in Mesa. When we talk about sustainability, it's not in the environmental thing. As a matter of fact, yesterday I was in front of a group and I used the word sustainability and was immediately accused of following, what was it, Agenda 21? Yeah, the UN one that, anyone who says the word sustainability is Marxist or Maoist or however far left you can get. And I said, I didn't know what Agenda 21 was until I was accused of following Agenda 21. But for us, sustainability is not an environmental term. It's about creating a community where my kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids will grow up and meet their educational, their professional, all their family aspirations in one place. And in order to do that, you've got to create a broad base economy. You've got to create a broad base of educational opportunities. You've got to create a way that they can choose their lifestyle. And believe it or not, my grandkids, even my kids, do not have as their vision a backyard with a pool and a barbecue. They're much more in tune with high-density living and with urban living and with social interaction. It's weird what things like Facebook and Twitter have done. They've created a way where you sit across the table and instead of talking to a person, you tweet them. So in many ways, they're much more challenged in communication than we are, but they're much more engaged than we are because they talk to 500 people, because on one second they're talking to the person across the table, and the next second they're talking to somebody who's in Great Britain, and to them it's all the same. And so to create these kind of long-term opportunities, we have to further define who we want to be when we grow up, and understand that once we grow up, we may have to start all over again. You've done it here in Vegas, just in the tourism industry. Yes, I remember the time when Las Vegas was the family mecca. And that worked out well for a few years, didn't it? Until it didn't. And then Vegas reinvented himself from the tourism standpoint. Las Vegas in southern Nevada is poised, just like Mesa was poised, because there are assets that are hidden. They're not hidden to you, but they're hidden to everyone outside of Las Vegas, who see only the glitz and the glamour, and their whole experience is McCarran to the Strip and back to McCarran. And I've known enough people and been around Las Vegas enough to know that to many of you, the vision of the Strip is just that. It's a place that is there, it's wonderful, it drives the economy, but it's not who you are in the sense that it doesn't define all the assets you have here. It doesn't define the great assets with the university you have here, with the leadership you have here, and with the fact that anytime you have this kind of activity, you're drawing together people who are talented, who can make things happen. And you have all the right things. Just like we looked at Mesa and we said, why aren't we succeeding at a higher level? Why aren't we? Well, shame on us for not telling the world of who we are, of really who we are. And shame on us for not putting in a plan and then utilizing the benefits we have by engaging those programs that are available at the state and federal level to accomplish a goal, not simply to do a project, not simply to meet a need, but to fulfill a vision. That's what we were able to do in Mesa, and we've just started. I don't want to tell you that we've accomplished anything other than getting to the starting point. But that, in many ways, is the hardest part, is getting there. With the Southern Nevada Strong, you're moving quickly to the starting point. There was a comment that was made about why people don't trust government. Believe me, I ran for government because I didn't trust government. I still don't trust government, okay? I spend my day with people who are very good at being bureaucrats, and they're very bad at understanding of why they are there. and with other politicians. I think one of the greatest advantages I had is I had to actually go out and entice people to come and pay me for a product that I hoped was good enough for them to accept. Then I had to in the home building business, once someone buys for you, you are connected for the next 3 lifetimes. In government, we don't understand enough about why it matters to the individual. If I could give you one suggestion, concentrate on individual values. We did this just recently, and I'll end up on this, with, a program we called Mesa. Okay. This was our civic engagement. If you go to the mesaaz.gov, you will find Mesa. What Mesa was, it was a way of civic engagement. Recognizing that a lot of people won't come to a meeting, a lot of people don't show up, but they want to be heard, we went online. And if you go there, you'll find a website that where basically any person can put an idea in. And it's logged in there, and it's sitting there, it's memorialized in there. And you can also vote on others. You can vote on up to 10 other ideas. It's purely the marketplace. It's the town square in cyber world. Now, what we did was we started this, and we were amazed when we were overwhelmed with ideas and with people voting on things. And so we assigned a citizens committee, not a government committee, a citizens committee, to go and take these ideas and define priorities and come to the council with their priorities. And what they decided was there were all sorts of these things that were quality of life issues, primarily parks and other things. And they came to city council and said, we want you to go and build these parks, and we'd like you to consider a bond issue. Now, do you know what it's like to consider a parks-only bond issue in this economy? You know, general rule is you never, as a city, put out a parks bond issue without tying it very closely with a public safety bond issue. See, the idea is you get people to vote yes for police and fire, and yeah, maybe they'll vote yes for parks. We went naked. $70 million bond issue in the worst economy ever in Mesa, Arizona, where we had foreclosures. Oh, and at the same time, our school district was putting out a $230 million bond issue. That bond issue passed 58-42. The school bond issue passed. Now, the thing that was most amazing about that is that around us, every school district, every bond in all the cities around us, and in progressive cities like Tempe and Chandler and towns like Gilbert, they all failed overwhelmingly. But in Mesa, they passed. The reason it passed is because it connected. We had things in that bond issue that I would have never, ever politically risked. Bought an old hotel that had a neat neon sign for preservation. Are you kidding me? It passed because that's what the people wanted. We did some other things that were exciting because we connected. We engaged in a way that no one else has. Now, we didn't only do this online. We also went out and had a bunch of citizen input out in the community, several meetings where they could come and look at the different proposals. Oh, and by the way, we set up like 3 and 4 terminals there so they could go over and put them online so they could have an idea, and we'd go show them how to put it in online. So we connected in a way that had never been connected. We've taken this and we're now going to do our general plan update, which is due in 2014, the same way. We just repackaged it and we call it My Mesa. This is also a community-driven process where people go online using the same program software that we had on the iMesa, and they talk about what they think about the community. Now, the exciting thing, this isn't like sending an email. Once they go in and they lodge their idea, it's there. They can go back a month later, 2 months later, 4 months later, and it's still there. And that's the important thing, is that people need to feel like their ideas are recognized. And the great way to let it be recognized is to have it there sitting on the website with votes, with comments, with other things. And we take these very seriously. This is also a citizen-driven initiative. There are ways you can create a better future. There are ways that you can do. I applaud you for taking this great step to make something happen in Southern Nevada. The values of your citizens will tell you which way to go if you'll listen. I encourage you to listen as much as you can. Talk about the things that are important. Talk about things that are bigger than specific streets. Talk about values. Look at, you do have areas that you can look at that are very similar to you. Utah in their Envision Utah, Credible Plan, Denver, Arizona. When I look at people, I say, these are our peer cities. These are people that understand us and we understand them because our histories are very similar. Our economies, believe it or not, are very similar. Our futures are very similar. The one thing, and I'll end on this, that Phoenix and Las Vegas have is the opportunity. You know, when Salt Lake and Denver went through their big crashes back in the 80s and the 90s, whether it be the oil and gas or Salt Lake, just because they were Salt Lake, they went through a huge crash, but they both did something incredibly smart. They came out of that and they said, we don't know what we have to do, but it's got to be different than what we were doing before. Because if we do what we did before, we're going to end up like we are now. And then just one quick example, Salt Lake, for example. One of the negatives perceived was that they had all these all these Mormons up there. I'm LDS, so I can say this, okay? All these insular people, and so people would invest because they had this stereotype of what it was like going into Salt Lake. And they realized, wait a second, that's not a negative. We have the highest percentage of bilingual, multilingual, college graduate professionals in the entire world is in Salt Lake City, Utah, with all these Mormon missionaries who went to far-off places like I did, like Bolivia. And they started selling that as an asset. And now guess what kind of companies now are investing like nobody's business in Salt Lake? People who have bilingual, multilingual, lived outside the United States, have an international perspective, college graduates. Now Salt Lake touts that as a huge asset, and they're successful in it. Las Vegas has those kinds of things. Whatever you're doing yesterday, you're like Mesa. You better do it differently tomorrow, because tomorrow isn't going to be good enough. Tomorrow isn't good enough, or yesterday isn't good enough today, and it's certainly not going to be good enough tomorrow. Thank you for inviting me to share a few thoughts. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And I think a couple questions. I said time for 3 or 4 or 5 questions if you want. Pot shots, wonderments. You've been sitting here for a long time. You just want to go home.
How did all those hotels kind of north of where the rail line's going to end? There's a whole street of hotels.
Yeah.
Where did those come from? And where did they go? When did they go away?
Well, the Main Street in Mesa was the old highway, was 89, and was the main, US 60, I'm sorry. And anyone who was coming from the east through, or from the north or through the east through the Phoenix area came down Main Street in Mesa. And so there was a lot of hotels like you've seen. It was like our strip, all right, without the wedding chapels. You know, that's how it developed. The thing about whenever you do any kind of development is it'll take time for redevelopment to take hold. The one thing the government is miserable at, and they've failed everywhere they've gone, is to force redevelopment. You know, we saw that with urban development in the 60s and 70s, but what we're really good at, and what government is great at, is setting the stage, making the base investment, whether it be in infrastructure, whether creating a regulatory framework. And that's not a political statement, that's just real life, because as you've learned here, private investment is so much more flexible. And private investment can react to market conditions and can find opportunities that government is simply not set up to do. And so I'm a big time invest heavily in infrastructure, because we've recognized that when government invests in good infrastructure, the returns on those investments are many times full. I mean, Mary Peters, the former Secretary of Transportation, said that they did a study and they said that conservatively they believe that the interstate highway system has greater than a 6-to-1 return on investment. And we see that in rail, we see that in other things. So that's how we'll get rid of those, or change those, or reposition those, or transition those into other uses. Rob? I'm sorry, what? Oh, yeah. I was going to mention that. You know, most of you probably already know Phoenix and Las Vegas are the 2 largest metro areas that are not connected by an interstate highway. Now that's a nice novelty, and it's a thing to say, because you know we do have that death trap that goes from Phoenix to Las Vegas, which is getting better. But we need that because Mexico is one of the most underutilized assets we have as a country. It's our 2nd largest trading partner. You know, the greatest way to fix illegal immigration is to create a strong Mexico. And a wonderful thing happens when we create a strong Mexico. We create a strong United States, especially for us. But the fact of the matter is that we have this huge gap between I-25 and I-5 is really where you've got to go. I-15 doesn't really hack it because it starts clear over in California. And so what you have is you have very inefficient transportation corridors up here. I-11 is essential for us. And I know that those of you here in Southern Nevada are really pushing it and driving it. Even if we just get between Phoenix and and Las Vegas. I know that the plans have it to go up western Nevada, and that has created just a few little controversies in Nevada. But if we can just get that connection between Phoenix and Las Vegas, all of a sudden we have I-19 that goes from the Mexican border. We can go up I-11 to I-15, and then we have a corridor that goes up. Incredibly important for both of our states' long-term future. Excited that in the MAPS 21, the recent transportation bill, it was designated as a corridor. But the fact of the matter is that we need to continue to work, and I know Senator Reid is big on it. Senator Boxer from California is hugely interested in it because of the congestion that I-5 has as a cargo and transportation corridor. I know I've gotten way too technical on you, but understand I-11 is good for southern Nevada. It's good for central Arizona. Yeah.
You have a room full of community leaders here.
Yes.
And I'm curious how you engage their peers in the Mesa process.
The first way we engaged them is to make sure they were all on board with the vision. That's where heat came in. That was great for Mesa. We had two things we came up with, and like I said, I come from even though I'm a CPA and attorney, I'm a marketing guy, and I like sayings and I like acronyms because they give people focus. Whatever you come up with, give people focus. And for us, it was building a better Mesa. I've given 500 speeches on building a better Mesa. And what that did is that I could tell people what my objective was. It didn't matter where you were. If you were at the highest high or the lowest low, that's where you started. Because when I built a home, it didn't matter what the ground was like. I took the property as it came, and I had to make it work. And so we started talking about building a better Mesa, and we got everyone saying that everything we do, every decision we make is going to be in the context of building a better Mesa. As a matter of fact, we would sit there with our staff, and we'd sit there with the community leaders, and they would say, well, we'd like to do this housing project. And we'd ask a basic question: how does that build a better Mesa? Well, it gives us more housing. They're not going to do it. Housing is a commodity. We have way too many foreclosed homes. I mean, we would really challenge them to think about whatever initiative they had was focused in how it improved our community, how it took us to that next level. When you then got heat in there and you had people focused on the strengths of the strengths of the community, then we were all almost in one voice. Now, everyone had different ideas as to how to get there, and that's always going to happen. But what they were not arguing over is where we wanted to go. And that's why I say you have to decide what you want to be when you grow up. And we decided in Mesa, much like you're going to decide, is that we understand that the perception outside, both inside and outside of Mesa, is not good enough to take us to the next place. We need different kinds of investment, more investment, and so we have to get everyone focused on that objective. And I would say that if you, as a community leader, do not feel like you're joined together in what your initiative is, why are you undertaking this Southern Nevada Strong? It's not about individual projects. If you're only thinking individual projects, you'll miss the point. Because once that project is done, then where do you go? This has got to be a long term. This has got to be a change in culture or a refinement of culture, however you want to put it. Maybe you're already headed there. You have to be enjoined as to why are we really doing this, and it's got to be explainable in one sentence or less. If it's not, you won't get there. You won't get there. So that's what I would say for community leaders. You're the ones that drive that message. You're the ones that make that happen. Last question. Yes, if there is one. Okay. Once again, good luck. I love Southern Nevada. Great place. Enjoy it. Thank you very much.